Happy Monday, everybody. This is Taylor Ashbrook from EBSN Online, the Ohio State beat writer here at EBSN Online, and I am joined by my co-host, AJ King from the Spectrum Podcast. Be sure to check him out on social media, and me as well. You've got our Twitter @s there at the bottom. How are you doing tonight, AJ?
I cannot complain. It's been a great first 2 weeks of football in the NFL and first 3 weeks for college football. So I'm about as happy as can be. The Buckeyes are rolling, and I appreciate you for having me tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited for this new show. Be sure to check us out every Monday night here on EBSN Online at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. AJ and I will be hosting this show. So just to kind of let you guys know what this is, since this is the pilot episode, this is Buckeye Beat. I'm the Ohio State insider here. He's the graduate and fan of Ohio State, and he also does digital media down at NBC down in Florida. So, I mean, we ain't playing around up here.
Not at all.
We got some learned people. We've got some learned people up here. We are very learned in the social media aspect.
For sure. Hey, street smart and book smart, too.
That is true. That is true. And I know you like to talk about hip hop and NBA, and I know you're going to bring in all those fire Laker takes here when the NBA season gets started. I know, and I'm so sad because I lost LeBron and you just got him. So I'm still not happy about that, and I know you're going to hold that over my head the whole season. So, but.
Well, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I do want to know, are you on the LeBron train in LA now?
No? I'm always on the LeBron train. I wasn't on the LeBron train in Miami, but he got us a championship now. So, like, I'm totally cool with LeBron. I'm Team Bron. So, I don't know if I'll get a Lakers Bron jersey or not. I'm still with my Cavs, but, I mean, I'm obviously rooting for him. I mean, the guy won us a championship. I mean, I can't be mad at him now. So, but anyways, this is not the NBA show. I know you and I like to talk about that on Twitter. So we're going to get into our Buckeyes because I know you and I love talking about Buckeyes just as much as we do NBA. So got a lot to get into, obviously, today. Ohio State just knocked off the number 15 team in the country, TCU, right there at AT&T Stadium a couple nights ago. I was there for that game covering it, and we got a lot to talk about that. Also, Urban Meyer returning to the sidelines this week against Tulane. He resumed? That's words. Those are words. Resumed his full coaching duties this week. Had his first press conference back. I'd say his first official press conference since Big Ten Media Day. I don't really count the suspension announcement press conference as like a true press conference.
Right.
But, I mean, this is the first time we've really heard him speak in depth since Big Ten Media Days on July 24th. So we're going to get right into that. AJ, what were your thoughts on the press conference?
Well, Taylor, I actually wanted to know what you thought right away, because I was personally surprised that he even took non-football questions right away. I figured Urban would try to move past this, go right into football talk, and kind of move away from something that kind of is a stain on his reputation and the university's reputation. Well, how did you feel about him standing up there for nearly 50 minutes and fielding questions from all types of local media? I thought it was pretty bold and kind of brave.
And national media too. I mean, my good friend Dan Murphy from ESPN, who does a terrific job covering the Big Ten. Shout out to Dan. I mean, he was asking questions. You had Pat Ford at Yahoo Sports was there. I mean, all the national media was there, as well as the plethora of local media that is there every single Monday, whether it's Ryan Day or Urban Meyer at the podium. I was very surprised at how much he did speak on this, to be honest with you, AJ. Usually every week we only get Urban Meyer for about 15 minutes, and then he's like, all right, I've given you my allotted 15 minutes, I'm out. But, I mean, I thought it was necessary today to do what he did do and address these sorts of things. So that way now they can move on to football from now on. They don't have to keep addressing this as the season goes on. They gave everybody their questions. They answered all the questions that everybody wanted answered. Now, how people like those answers or interpret those answers as their own problem, but Urban did answer every single question that was posed to him today. And I mean, they spoke for almost an hour. And I actually had to go back and read the transcript and watch parts of the press conference just because there was so much that was addressed in that press conference that it was hard for me to unpack all of that stuff in my mind. That I had to go back and read it all. But I want to give a lot of credit to Urban for answering all those questions. He stepped up and did the right thing and addressed every single question that needed to be addressed. So now he has the liberty to move on and talk about football and worry about football from here on out. Now I want to get your take on it.
Yeah, I like you said, I want to be fair to Urban because I've been pretty critical since the beginning of this whole debacle. I felt like he was entirely too loyal to Zach Smith, a person who he probably shouldn't have had around the Ohio State football program. You're talking about student athletes, and the NCAA loves to use that word. Well, these guys shouldn't be learning from somebody who conducts themselves, even besides the biggest allegation of domestic violence, somebody who conducted himself just poorly in many areas as everything started to come out with Brett McMurphy's reporting. Just poorly conducted himself as a person and isn't somebody I would want around my football program. But I do give Urban credit. He stood on the podium again for nearly an hour. He took all questions. Like you said, I'm not really buying a whole lot of what he said. I find it odd that he continues to feel like he needs to tell us that he didn't lie at Big Ten Media Day. And sure, he may say that he was addressing the arrest allegation of Zach Smith, and that's a likely story. But I just feel like he doesn't need to continue to tell us that he didn't lie when we know he didn't speak the truth. It was a lot of very presidential answers, if you will, if you catch my drift. So I just felt like...
Well, you got to specify what president we're talking about here, AJ, now. Because are we talking Obama address or are we talking Trump address? I don't know if he was quite Trump level. I mean, that takes a special kind of crazy to get to that kind of level. But just kind of going off what you said, I mean, I think it was important that Urban addressed that he didn't lie because I'll be honest with you, and I just want to set this straight because I was very critical about when Ohio State hired Urban Meyer because I knew about the allegations against several of his players and arrests. Not a lot of them weren't even allegations. A lot of them were flat out arrests when he was at Florida. So that was a very critical thing I had of him, but I mean, he has shown, in my opinion, since he's been at Ohio State, that he takes these things very seriously. I mean, remember back in 2013, they were coming off of that 12-0 undefeated season, number 2 team in the country. Carlos Hyde yells at a woman in a nightclub, suspended 3 games, best running back on their team. And I mean, so hang on. Let me finish. But I mean, that is the action of a guy who says, I'm not taking this crap anymore. You know, we're good enough. We're going to win no matter who's on our team. We don't support that sort of thing. And there's only been a handful of incidences at Ohio State since he took over as the program, head of the program, and he has handled every single one of those, in my opinion, very well. I mean, remember in 2015 when JT Barrett got a DUI in the middle of their defending national title season? Everybody was wondering, is he going to suspend him? I mean, I don't know if he'll suspend him because he's the starting quarterback and they just won the national title. But God love him, he did give him a game suspension and he took away his scholarship the following summer. So, I mean, and you think about how much love and the things that Urban Meyer has said about JT Barrett throughout his whole career, the fact that he suspended that guy, I don't think I've ever heard Urban Meyer speak so highly about another person in Ohio State history than JT Barrett. So the fact that he would suspend that guy, that's what's never made sense to me about this whole situation, is that he would supposedly cover up domestic violence for years for a guy that's not even that good of a wide receivers coach. I mean, I've never liked Zach Smith. I've heard stories about him getting thrown out of bars in Powell, and I agree. He should have never even been hired at Ohio State. But I think there's a lot more, and in fact, I want to say this. I know there's more to this story because I have a close source who has been through domestic violence herself. I can't divulge her name because I respect her privacy and those sorts of things. And I just don't want to start a whole mess. But I could tell you things that the media has not reported on, or that we can't report on because it's not considered PC or with the narrative. And that's why I think it was important for Urban Meyer to iterate that he was not suspended because he covered up domestic violence. I don't believe Urban Meyer covered up domestic violence. Now, was the situation handled properly? Obviously not. I mean, Zach Smith should have been gone a long time ago for a myriad of things outside of the alleged abuse that he waged against his wife, now ex-wife. But I think I don't think Urban outright lied at Big Ten Media Days, because I was there at Big Ten Media Days, and I remember the initial report from Brett McMurphy was that Zach Smith was arrested on felony assault charges, and that was what Urban Meyer was answering about. Well, here's the thing. Zach Smith was never arrested, and he certainly wasn't arrested on felony charges. So I think that's where a lot of – it's not a lie. I think it was just a misclarification on both the media and Urban Meyer's sides that – he thought he was addressing the fact that there was a report that said he was arrested for a felony charge, which obviously wasn't the case. Now, there was a police report, but the police report found nothing there, and then it was later dismissed. Now, whether that report was conclusive and how well did the investigation happen, I mean, that's the question. I mean, you never know, but I think it's kind of scary when we're in a time in society where the job of law enforcement is coming into question on whether or not they did a good enough investigation. And I don't know what side of that I would be on, but the report cited, and this is something that Urban said that I want to get your take on here in a minute, is that the report said he relied too much on the police report and law enforcement in dealing with Zach Smith. And what Urban said is that the reason he didn't conduct his own investigation is because he wasn't allowed to. If he were to reach out to Courtney Smith while the police were conducting their investigation, that's called tampering, and that is a legal issue in the eyes of the law that he could get in trouble for. Now, should he have reached out to Courtney Smith after the investigation was concluded? That's up to everybody to make their own decision, but that's court of public opinion at that point. But the point is, did Urban Meyer do what it was in his contract and what he was obligated to do as the football head coach? Whatever your moral clause is beside the point. Did he do what was in his contract?
I think I continue to harp back on the fact, just briefly speaking on the police point of things, I think I continue to harp back on the fact that if this went on in Tallahassee or Tuscaloosa, or any college football or college town that has a major college football team in it, if this happened in any of those areas, Ohio State fans would feel the need to say this was a cover-up. Just plain and simple. I mean, obviously, we saw that back with Jameis Winston when he was still at Florida State. We saw Ohio State fans be very outspoken against the fact that it seemed like, and again, we don't know all the facts, but it seemed like Tallahassee police covered up for Jameis Winston. So that's the thing I continue to harp back on that point. But my final point that I'll make, and you made a lot of great points, Taylor, I think I just have to always think about, so Urban did a great job disciplining his players, but why was he not as firm on Zach Smith? That's what I'll continue to say, and that's my final point. He's been firm in his players since he's been at Ohio State. You're 100% correct, but he was entirely too loyal to a guy who, like you said, was not even that great at his job.
Well, I'm in full agreement with you on that part, AJ, and I don't think that's ever been a question that Urban probably should have never even hired him, or at least fired him a long time ago. Now, another thing that I almost had a thought of is there a legal clause that if Urban were to fire Zach Smith based on purely allegations, if the police didn't find anything or if there was no substantial evidence, because Urban Meyer never saw the photos of Courtney Smith back then. Or, Courtney Smith never came to Urban Meyer with these photos. I don't even believe the photos, in that text exchange with Shelly Meyer, whenever that took place. I don't think she actually sent Shelly the photos, which I thought, that might have been something that she would have done. Go ahead.
Yeah. Again, a lot of the things, and another reason why I just feel like I wish he would have stuck to football. And this is really weird because obviously we want our leaders to take accountability. But one of the reasons I felt like I wish he would have stuck to football is I just don't buy a lot of what he said. I don't necessarily buy that he didn't see these text messages from his wife. It's hard for me to believe that a guy who comes out and says that he's so close with his wife didn't see these text messages or just didn't have any idea that something was going on in that situation. So that's my deal. But harping back on your point about the legal issue, we're seeing that now with Louisville because Rick Pitino got fired at Louisville and now he's suing the university. So we're seeing that. But at the same time, Louisville felt like it was in their best interest to fire Rick Pitino because it looked bad on their university. And that's kind of what we're seeing now with Ohio State, where you kind of have to make a decision. Do I keep a guy who's been here and who has been doing questionable things all along because I'm scared to get sued, or do we let him go because it's a PR firing and we need to make sure our university stays in the proper light and stays in a good light with the fan base? So I guess that's my thing. If he had been fired, maybe he could have potentially sued for a wrongful termination suit. But at the same time, is that worth something? Is that worth fighting as a large university, especially one like Ohio State, which is such a major brand, as you know?
Oh, obvious. I mean, I think everybody in the state of Ohio and the country knows how big of a brand Ohio State is. I mean, just look at the game this Saturday in AT&T Stadium. You're talking about it was 18 or 19 miles away from TCU's campus and over 1,000 miles away from Ohio State's, yet Ohio State fans packed about 70% of that place at least. I was very shocked at the amount of Ohio State fans that came down for just a regular season game. I mean, even when I was at the airport, I just saw tons of Ohio State fans and outside of AT&T Stadium. But kind of getting back to the point about Urban Meyer, well, one of the things that Urban kind of stressed is that the final straw for him was the fact of the issues that happened this summer with the trespassing incident,
right,
where Zach Smith was dropping off the kids at Courtney Smith's house, apparently without her knowing about it. But Urban Meyer says that Zach Smith has been told multiple times that whenever he does something or there is any sort of legal issue or anything like that, he is to report it to him immediately so that way he can report it to Gene Smith. And the final straw for him was that Urban found out about the trespassing incident from someone else. And it was very much later. He didn't find out until I think weeks later. So that was kind of the final straw for Urban, saying, Zach, I can't trust you anymore. If you can't come to me with these issues, I can't protect you. I'm done. And one of the things Urban keeps reiterating about the 2015 incident is that he went to Zach Smith about the incident and asked him what was going on. And Zach Smith told him his account of things. And he said, Zach, I swear to God, if you hit her, you're fired on the spot. And I actually kind of believe that he said that. I don't know the wording of what was said, but I believe Urban Meyer, if he had proof that he had hit her, if I can get my pronouns correct here, if he had proof that he had hit her, I do believe he would have fired him on the spot. But you also don't want to get into the point where you're firing coaches based on just allegations, because I think you and I both know this. The industry of college football and sports in general can be a very dirty business sometimes, and there are people out there that just want to use the system. And I mean, I've heard stories from former players throughout this whole ordeal of crazy allegations that have been waged against them that were obviously dismissed because there was no weight to bear there. So I think that's where Urban's kind of concern was with firing Zach Smith is you don't want to get into the precedent of firing people just based on allegations. That's why Urban says he has always relied on law enforcement in these situations to tell him what happened, and he can make up his mind and his own decision based on those accounts. So that's why he was kind of saying about being reliant on law enforcement. And I kind of understand where he's coming from there. Now, was law enforcement conclusive in their investigation? I mean, nobody was there, so we don't officially know what happened. There's a lot more to this story that I don't think we're getting on both sides, on Courtney Smith's side and on Zach Smith's side. I think there are some things that aren't being said because they're just things that can't be said publicly. And that was one of the things that Urban actually, as I'm going through the transcript of his press conference here, he was actually asked if there are things he wishes he could say, but he feels like he can't say about this issue. And just from the look on Urban's, I mean, he kind of gave a very untruthful answer to that question. I think there are plenty of things he wants to say about the issue, but he can't for politically correct reasons. But I mean, he gave the answer. He said, this has been occupying his life for however many weeks now. He says, I think I've said everything I can. And the reporter just kind of reiterated, he said, because I know this is a delicate situation, but is there anything? And right away he said, very delicate. Right. So, I mean, Urban Meyer, it's pretty obvious there are things that Urban Meyer wants to say about this incident, and I'm sure he could probably give us a lot more clarification on this issue, but I think he just wants to take his suspension and keep on moving down the line, and this will blow over in a few weeks, hopefully. I think that's kind of the approach that he's going to, because I remember a few months ago when Tom Izzo and Mark D'Antonio were in the news about those allegations about Michigan State. I remember I was actually at the Big Ten men's basketball tournament when all those allegations were coming up with Tom Izzo. And, there were all kinds of questions being asked to him, but he just covered the players' mics and said, we're not answering questions about this. And speaking of questions, we want to hear from you guys, because the unique thing about EBSN Online here is we are the voice of the fans. We want to hear the voices of the fans. So be sure to comment on our Facebook pages and Twitter feeds and Periscope and all that good stuff. We want to hear your takes on it. We want to hear what you want to know, all that good stuff.
Yeah, let me jump in here real quick, Taylor. Let me give some shout-outs to people who have been commenting with us and have been patient so far as we're talking a little bit of Urban Meyer. Everybody wants to talk football. We're getting ready to get into that. But let me give a couple shout-outs. Charles Warren, Scott Harder, James Walker, Johnson John, Jace Lehman. Thanks all you guys who've been commenting with us on Facebook Live. Bobby Stover, Ben Montez. We're going to try to get to everybody's comments. We're going to be talking some football real soon, so hang in there. We just had the Urban Meyer press conference, so we're kind of recapping that before we jump into football.
Well said, Producer G. Thank you for coming in. That's Producer G. He's doing a great job here for us. Thank you so much for helping us put this show together. Without him, we don't have this show. So thank you to everybody. Give some love to Producer G over there, making all this stuff happen. And he's right. I want to get into football here, but I felt because I am kind of tired of talking about this issue. And
absolutely.
But my last thing I want to say,
commenters and everyone else is tired too.
Yeah. Oh, I know everybody's tired of it. I know. And I think, let's see, we had Joe McBride on Facebook comment, I'll just be glad when this bleep storm is over. You and me both, Joe. I think we're all ready to just move on, which is why I'm glad Urban did this press conference today, because he spoke in great lengths about all this. He answered every single question, and he did that with the intent that we can finally move on to football, hopefully starting tomorrow with his return to the Big Ten teleconference tomorrow afternoon. Also, be sure to follow us here on EBSN Online. I'll have you guys all updated updated on what he says tomorrow in the teleconference, so be sure to follow us for that. But just wanted to get your last take on the whole situation and what you think about it, AJ.
I mean, at the end of the day, and I spoke a little bit about this on the Spectrum earlier when I was recording with my homie Jordan Plain. I think at the end of the day,
shout out to Jordan.
Ohio State. Yeah, shout out to Jordan. I think at the end of the day, Ohio State made their decision, right? Whether it was Michael Drake himself or it was the Board of Trustees coming together and making a final decision, they made their decision. Urban Meyer is Ohio State's football coach, and I'm ready to move on. I don't have to love his decision-making. I don't even have to love him as a person, but I will support him as Ohio State's football coach. So I think that's my final take on it. And as he comes back to the sideline this weekend, I'm really interested to see what the offense is going to look like. Obviously, he's been a part of the game planning over the past 2 weeks. So it's not like it's been completely devoid of Urban's presence. But I'm excited to see what the offense is going to look like. And I do want to get into TCU and Ohio State and how the offense looked there and how it's going to translate going forward, obviously against Tulane, but more so against Penn State in 2 weeks. As the big boys come to town, Ohio State got a big boy win, but there's going to be a lot more of that coming in the future. So what was your impression of TCU Ohio State game? Did you feel like the offense flowed smoothly throughout the game? What were some of the issues you saw in the first half that slowed them up?
That's a great question, AJ. Thanks for asking that. Also, thank you for directing this towards football now, because I know we've got a lot of people in the comments saying that, we're tired of hearing that. Trust us, guys. We're tired of talking about it, but stuff keeps happening, and we have to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it, but it's what's happening, so we just have to address it. But I'm completely done talking about it now. We beat this thing to death over the past 2 months. Honestly, I think if Ohio State would have just ignored it, I think it honestly would have gone away by now. But I think they've handled it to the best of their abilities, and I think that now people can move on to football. So talking about football, answering your question, getting into the TCU game, yeah, there were a lot of things that went wrong in the first half for Ohio State, and for the whole game, in fact. And just kind of getting my first takeaway of the game, I just want to give a quick takeaway from the game. What has shocked me about Ohio State for years now is their ability to make so many mistakes and shoot themselves in the foot so many times against big-time opponents and still come out victorious just because they're so damn talented. I mean, it's ridiculous how talented they are. Now, TCU, I'm not going to play around. They got some guys on that team that can scoot. That Jalen Reagor, oh my God, I know that touchdown that he had on the forward lateral got, called back, but oh my God, I don't think I've ever seen a guy outrun.
Track-star speed.
He's got ridiculous speed. I don't think I've ever seen a guy outrun an Ohio State defender like that. Usually the Ohio State defender is closing in. They won't catch up to them, but they're closing in. But, I mean, he was just outrunning Ohio State defenders, and they're pretty darn fast at Ohio State. So that was my biggest takeaway from the game, is that they can win these games, make so many mistakes, and still win these games against really good opponents. Now, is that going to work in 2 weeks against Penn State? I highly doubt it. They've got a lot of things that they got to clean up. One of the minor things that stood out to me about the entire game is how low the snaps were. Michael Jordan was not having a very good night at center. They were very low snaps. Austin Mack had all those drops, and he's usually a really reliable guy. Michael Jordan's a usually reliable guy. I don't know if it was the nerves of their first big game of the season or if it was not having Urban in those situations, where Urban has been in those situations a lot more than Ryan Day. I'm not saying Ryan Day didn't do a good job, obviously. I mean, he has done a phenomenal job, and an excellent job. Urban Meyer called him elite today in his press conference, and I think he's going to get plenty of job offers after the season. I think he's the next great head coach in college football. But there were a couple of situations in the game where I thought maybe having Urban Meyer would have made an effect. For example, that 4th and short there around midfield. I'm not so sure Urban Meyer wouldn't have gone for it there because Ohio State really needed the momentum there. I mean, they were still trailing by, I think it was, a point or so at that point.
So yeah, I think that was definitely the biggest point where I felt like they missed Urban.
Yes.
And like you said, a lot of mistakes in the first half. As much as I was worried about Ohio State's offense sputtering in the first half, you have to remember on the opening drive of the game, Dwayne Haskins comes out with a beautiful deep ball. They get 1st and goal inside the 2-yard line, and he throws a dart right into Austin Mack's chest, and he drops it. So that's, again, like you said, that's one of those mental mistakes, one of those mistakes they made to really slow them down. And it kind of messed up the rhythm for the rest of the first half. And like you said, Michael Jordan's snaps really was throwing off the rhythm of the Ohio State offense. I think I will say I wasn't worried until the score got to 21-13 when TCU came out and scored right out of halftime, because it kind of felt like a little bit some remnants of what we saw with Ohio State and Clemson 2 years ago in the national semifinal, where it felt like one of those nights where the offense just would not click and they just couldn't find something to give them a spark. But then, Paris Campbell broke off a nice 60-yard touchdown reception on a screen pass, and the floodgates opened up.
I mean, Paris Campbell's just ridiculously fast, isn't it? I mean, he is. I've enjoyed covering him so much in his time here, and I'm so glad he's having the season he is having now, because he's one of those guys that has earned it. Kind of going off of your Clemson comparison there, I don't know if it's quite Clemson comparison. Maybe more like a Penn State last year. But I mean, against Clemson, they just couldn't get anything going offensively.
Right.
They had a couple of nice drives there in the first half. They just kind of sputtered out, whether it be because of penalties or a drop or something like that, where it's like they had some really good moments in the first half. They just weren't able to string enough of those good moments together to result in a touchdown until midway through the third quarter. And kind of getting into some questions here because we want to take some comments from the viewers. Mike Hauser says TCU is better than Penn State. Yes, we play in Happy Valley. But I feared TCU more and their speed. He thought they were faster than Penn State, so he thinks that TCU is better than Penn State. He also says Mack made one huge catch, then got the dropsies. It's a mental game, but he'll be back. I agree with you. I think that's what kind of shocked me about this game, and I was kind of disappointed in Buckeye Nation that they were getting on Mack so much. I'm like, it's one game. He's usually a very reliable target. He's a really great receiver. I mean, everybody has those mental lapses every now and then. Now, should Ohio State have kept going to him after the second or third drop is a question for Brian Hartline, the wide receivers coach. And he kind of clarified in a tweet on yesterday. I keep forgetting yesterday was Sunday. It's only Monday. I've gotten very little sleep the past 72 hours. So everybody knows I've spent most of my time in airports, in cars and stuff. So pray for me. Pray for
glad you made it back safely.
Yeah. But, I was kind of talking there about, about Mack. I mean, he's a really good receiver, and they have those games from time to time. I think he'll be back. I wouldn't expect him to not have a good performance against Tulane. I think he's going to put up numbers against Tulane, and going off of why they kept going back to him. Brian Hartline, the interim wide receivers coach. By the way, his interim tag needs to be removed. He's a really good wide receivers coach, and he said that you don't want the guys to think that you've lost your confidence in them. So you keep going back to those guys, even if it's not working, trying to see if you can get them to go. And then at one point they did stop going to Austin Mack after the fourth drop. And then they started using KJ Hill more. And obviously that had great success. KJ Hill was probably the best receiver of the game against Ohio State, in my opinion. There were so many good ones, Paris Campbell and whatnot. But, they went to KJ Hill eventually, and he got them the yardage that they needed. But, these are mental errors. These are guys struggling in a big game for the first time this season, and these things will definitely be cleaned up now. I'm actually happy that they played TCU before they went straight into a whiteout at Penn State, because now they've gotten a big-time game under their belts. They've got that experience, and there are plenty of mental errors that Urban and the coaching staff will be able to clean up here in the next week or so before they have to go into a hostile environment like Happy Valley and play in that whiteout at night.
I think it's interesting that one of our commenters said that they're more worried about TCU than they would be with Penn State. Even if his premise is right that TCU is a better football team and has better overall speed, I think going into Happy Valley for a whiteout is always my biggest concern during a season. Not even when Michigan comes to town or when Ohio State goes to the big house am I more scared than a whiteout at Penn State. Things seem to always be close. Things seem to always be wacky. And it always seems like it comes down to one or two plays at the end of a game. Obviously, 2014, Ohio State wins the national championship. They have to win in overtime, a Joey Bosa walk-off sack. And then in 2016, they get the field goal blocked and they lose. So it always seems to come down to one or two plays.
Well, and then you left out last year when they had that amazing comeback. I mean, that took JT Barrett's best quarter he's ever played in his life to win that game, you know.
Exactly. And so
And remember when we were talking about JT Barrett as the Heisman frontrunner after that week, and then Iowa happened like 6 days later?
Oh my gosh.
That was just an enigma. I will never understand what happened that week. I still cannot process it, and I've had almost a year to process it.
Yeah, he played the best game of his life, and then he followed that up with the worst game of his life. So maybe we shouldn't judge JT on either of those games because, yeah.
Oh, I know you stan JT. Just so our viewers know, AJ here is like the biggest JT stan of all time, just so you know.
Yes, I am. And we talked a little bit about it before the show. I love JT. It is time for the Dwayne train, but we must not forget that JT is the greatest quarterback to ever grace Ohio State's backfield. But yes, getting back to Penn State, I feel like Ohio State.
I'm just gonna keep my
really
mouth shut on that last
game.
question. By the way,
I know that's why
I'm not even gonna respond to that hot take. Like statistically,
why
yes,
I kept going.
But I've seen Troy Smith. I've seen Terrell Pryor in his prime. I've seen these guys.
I've seen him too, and JT did more than all of those guys. But
he didn't win a national championship.
He did.
That was Cardale. No, I think that's kind of unfair of me to say. I think JT would have won the national championship that year had he not gotten hurt. So that's not fair of me to say. That's unfair to JT, and I'm sorry.
Shout out JT. We need to get JT on the podcast.
We do.
He'd be everything on here.
You're connected. Get him on the podcast. You get all those guys to follow you.
He's not on an NFL roster. So
that's true. I mean, there's no issues with that. So
yeah, we might have to get him on here popping. But just to finish out my Penn State thoughts, I feel like even if TCU is a better team and they have more team speed, going into a whiteout at Penn State will be incredibly difficult to win. It's going to come down to the last few plays, and they're going to have to be pinpoint accurate. They're not going to be able to make mental mistakes and drop passes and have low snaps, and they're going to have to protect Dwayne Haskins better than they did against TCU to be able to come out of Happy Valley with a win, which reminds me, Taylor, that's one of the things that stood out to me in the game on Saturday was Dwayne Haskins finally seeing some pressure. Facing Rutgers and Oregon State, he had all day to throw, and he was carving up their secondaries. TCU got after the quarterback, and I thought that was, really telling. And at times, Dwayne kind of crumbled under the pressure. He obviously wasn't as accurate as he was in the past, and though he worked through it, I felt like that was something that needed to be cleaned up. Is the line, are they going to be able to hold up when they go to Happy Valley and face Penn State? I'm a little concerned about that. That's probably one of the things that concern me most. Because like you said, Austin Max probably is going to have a bad game like that again. They're probably not going to have as many mental mistakes, but the offensive line is a concern.
I mean, I'm partially in agreement with you there. I think the offensive line will be fine against Penn State. And to be fair, Dwayne Haskins didn't struggle that much against the pressure. I mean, here's just the stats I'm looking at from Pro Football Focus College Edition. When he was blitzed 17 times, and on those 17 attempts, he had 9 completions, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So the narrative that he struggled under pressure, I mean, at first he might have. And that's normal. I mean, he's a first-time starting quarterback, and he's facing a pass rush after playing, children of the poor the first couple of games.
Basically.
So, I mean, and he's going to have that again this week against Tulane. Sorry, Tulane, but that's just what they are. And they've got some things they've got to clean up before they play Penn State next week. But, I mean, he had a 122.2 passer rating when he was being blitzed. So, I mean, he didn't play as bad under pressure as people thought. I actually thought he played phenomenal during the game. Now, were there some drops as well on some of those passes under pressure? Were there a couple of incompletions? Yes, and I think that he'll continue to get better and better as he gets more and more experienced. And now that he's seen that, he's prepared for it when they play Penn State and they play against that dominant pass rush that they usually have. So I don't know that he struggled that much. I mean, the guy threw for 344 yards and had 3 total touchdowns against a top 15 team in the country as a first-time starter. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, I think he's cemented himself as one of, if not the Heisman frontrunner with that performance, with all of the drops and all of the pressures he was getting. To put on that kind of performance and without your head coach there on the sidelines coaching you up. I don't know why I emphasized headlines like that, but I mean, those are a lot of things to take into account. And I think Dwayne Haskins did a really good job. What did you guys think of Dwayne Haskins? We want to hear from you guys in the comments. Let's hear from what you guys had to say. We want to hear your take on Dwayne Haskins. We want to hear if you think Austin Mack and the offensive line is going to get better in the future. Give us your comments down below, and we'll read them here on the show.
And absolutely. And like you said, Dwayne did a great job of fighting through adversity, fighting through his guys, dropping some passes, and he had a tremendous second half. When the floodgates opened up, basically when it rained, it poured. He continued to his dominance. He took Ohio State to a huge victory. My question for you, and as we know, star defensive lineman Nick Bosa had something of a groin injury during that game. Who's more important for Ohio State's success? Obviously, football is a quarterback-driven game, especially in this era of spread offenses. But who's more important, or better yet, who's a better player? Is it Nick Bosa or is it Dwayne Haskins? Because they've both been dominant, and without either one of them, I'm worried for the future, which is why I'm hoping Nick sits out against Tulane.
That's a good question, AJ. And before I get into that, I'm gonna answer some of the fans here. Michael Egan on Facebook says he doesn't think Dwayne Haskins folded under pressure at all. He said he had drops and there was a missed field goal. I almost forgot about that field goal. I completely forgot about that. There was just so much that happened in that game. You completely forgot about it.
Seriously.
So thank you, Michael, for your take. Let's see here. Sean Fraley says he was very poised under pressure. I agree. I think he did very well under pressure, being a first-time starting quarterback, starting in his first big game. I mean, I know he had that experience against Michigan last year, but, I mean, this is the first time he's really taken the reins. So thank you guys for commenting. We appreciate all those. Be sure to drop some comments or questions down below and we'll get to those. To get to your point about Nick Bosa, just a quick injury update on him because Urban did give us more knowledge on him today in his press conference. Believe it or not, he did talk about football a little bit at his football press conference, which was nice. Hopefully we'll get some more answers from him on the teleconference tomorrow. And then obviously after Tulane, we'll get to hear more football analysis from the head coach. But Urban Meyer did say that Nick Bosa will be out this week against Tulane. He suffered an abdominal/groin injury there against TCU. They are going to be doing more tests on him later this week. They hope to have him against Penn State. They didn't give any clarification whether he would be available against Penn State. Obviously, that's why they're giving him more tests this week, but a smart move, obviously, to sit him out against Tulane. They don't exactly need his presence against the mighty Green Wave. So I think
when the mighty Green Wave come into your stadium, you don't walk out with a win so easily.
Do they go roll wave? Is that kind of their thing? Like roll tide? Like I think that can they steal roll tide? Because they are technically a tide, with that Green Wave. So I don't know. I don't know if there's trademark infringement there or something like that, but
it couldn't hurt, man. They're about to catch a big Buckeye tide this weekend, so I feel bad for those kids, really.
I do, and I'm using the hashtag pray for Tulane the whole week, by the way. Urban's back, so hashtag pray for Tulane.
Hey y'all, everybody, by the way, follow Taylor on Twitter. She's a great follow. She's dope. She always keeps me updated on what's going on around the program, as I'm all the way down here in Florida with all the crazy things that happen down here in the South. She always keeps me updated. So follow Taylor on Twitter.
Yeah, your news is really fun for me to watch because whenever anything crazy happens, it's usually Florida. So it's really fun to read your stories sometimes. But answering your question on who do I think is a better player, Nick Bosa or Dwayne Haskins, I really don't know. I think Bosa is the better player overall. Now, if you were to ask me who is more important to Ohio State's overall success, I think it's probably a little bit closer, and I might even give the edge to Dwayne. And I hate to have these takes here because I got to talk to these guys in practice. I don't know if they're watching these shows or not, but but I think Dwayne, anytime you're a quarterback, that's the most important position on your team, especially in college. Now, defensive end, that's one of the next most important. But I think you saw last week, they got through it without him there in the second half. You still got guys like Draymond Jones, Jonathan Cooper, Chase Young, Robert Landers. I don't think you're really suffering there depth-wise on that defensive line. Good Lord, they've got a lot of depth at that position.
So much talent.
So much depth. But I think Nick Bosa is probably the better player overall, and I think it's kind of sad that he's going to get no Heisman consideration just because defensive players for some reason don't, and they just need to say that the Heisman is an offensive award at this point. But I think Dwayne Haskins might be more important overall. Like if Ohio State didn't have Nick Bosa, that would obviously be a huge crippling blow to them, but I think they would be able to deal with that more than if Dwayne Haskins, and I don't even know if I can say that because they've got Tate Martell at quarterback. Now, what his throwing ability is compared to Dwayne's is yet to be answered, but he obviously adds that running attack that Urban Meyer always loves. So, it's really hard to answer that question, AJ. I think they're both equally important to their roles on offense and defense. That's my take on that. Who do you think is?
Well, I tend to agree with you.
Oh, by the way, I want to hear from everybody else, too. Comment down below. Who do you think is better, Dwayne or Nick Bosa? We want to hear from you guys. But go ahead, AJ. Sorry.
No, I tend to agree with you on the situation. I think Nick is probably a better overall player. If you're talking about NFL draft, I've seen Nick Bosa at the top of a lot of draft boards, although I do think Dwayne's stock is going to skyrocket by the end of this season and probably will get to a point where he feels like he needs to leave early because his stock will rise so high.
I'm just going to interrupt you there, AJ. I think he might be a one and done. If he was smart, he would be a one and done. Now, whether his love for Ohio State and because he's friends with a lot of that receiving core like Johnny Dixon and Paris Campbell. So now that they're gone, obviously you're really good friends with everybody on the team. Long live the brotherhood and all that good stuff. But if he's getting. This is a very weak quarterback class this year. He could very easily be one of the top 3 quarterbacks, if not the top quarterback in this draft. And you could see Nick Bosa number 1 and then Dwayne Haskins not too far behind him. Or even Dwayne Haskins number 1 overall. We don't know what else he's going to do this season. If he goes out there, smokes Penn State, smokes Michigan State, smokes Michigan, smokes Wisconsin in a Big Ten tournament. championship. They play one game. It's not a tournament. If he goes out and smokes at Wisconsin in a Big Ten championship, and goes on to win a college football playoff, beats an Alabama or a Clemson or a Georgia or an Oklahoma, a team like that. I mean, it's going to be pretty darn hard to turn down that kind of talent at quarterback if he can produce these kinds of numbers. And obviously, he's more of an NFL-style quarterback than we've ever seen at Ohio State. He's had a total of 7 rushes in his first 3 games. They would normally triple that rush count in one game for Ohio State. So, he's going to go pretty high in this draft, in my opinion, if he continues to perform the way he's performing. Now, I still think Nick Bosa is the number 1 overall player in this draft, and he's going to make some lucky team very happy for the next decade. Him and his brother both, obviously. I mean, Joey's obviously dominating in the NFL. Obviously, he's got that injury that's keeping him out till October now. But he's now one of the best defensive players in the league, and I think Nick Bosa has a chance to be even better than that.
Yeah, there's some times where I look out there and he's so dominant that I'm like, I can't believe the second version is better than the first. Sometimes, Nick is genuinely unblockable sometimes, and it's incredible to watch. And I agree with you, piggybacking on what you said about Dwayne. I think we could see a scenario where perhaps those 2 guys go 1 and 2 in the draft. I can't even remember the last time I saw that from one program having the top 2 guys.
I think Miami might have done it like in the early 2000s, if I remember correct. I don't know. I'd have to look that up. But for some reason, I remember like that Miami team from 01 and 02 producing I know they had 6 picks in the first round, but for some reason I remember them going 1 and 2 respectively. I may be wrong on that, so don't quote me on that, but I just remember that vaguely for some reason.
Right, and Ohio State a few years ago had 5 guys go in the first round, so they've had a stockpile of talent go in the NFL draft, but you're talking about 2 guys that legitimately could be at the very top. So it's amazing to see. But you brought up something about Dwayne and the rushing attack, which is something I really wanted to talk about today. Now, obviously, I'm extremely excited. Again, you think I'm a JT Barrett stan, which you would be right. But
I know I'm right on that, dude. Come on. You stan JT Barrett all day long, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just
absolutely.
We just don't have to hide it.
And
embrace who you are,
right.
Man. Embrace the stan of JT Barrett in you.
Oh, it's right here. There's my mom and then my sister and then there's JT Barrett. I think he comes right after those 2. So, he might be inching up closer to family level.
Where is Kobe in that hierarchy? I thought Kobe was above JT. Where's Kobe?
We're just talking college football
okay,
now. Kobe is next level.
You got Kobe, maybe a couple of other NBA players, and then you'd have JT Barrett. But
yeah, Steph's somewhere in there too.
I know Steph's up there. I almost forgot Steph. How could I forget Steph?
But one of the things I was looking forward to this season, honest to God, was the fact that we didn't have to see a quarterback running 20 to 25 times a game. And I felt like a lot of times in big games, Urban leaned on JT's running ability so much that it hampered the offense. But now we're at a situation, obviously Dwayne gets his first rushing touchdown against TCU, but we're in a situation now where I feel like he almost doesn't bring enough of the quarterback running game to the offense. And no matter what, you need that element in Urban Meyer's offense. What do you need to see from Dwayne in that capacity moving forward? Is it something where just have it there to mix it in just in case, or does he really need to run the ball 5 to 10 times to keep the defense honest?
That's a good question, AJ. And before I answer that, I just want to close about the Nick Bosa, Dwayne Haskins debate. Let's get some weigh-ins here on Facebook. Mike Hauser says, you really can't judge between the two totally different positions that might require totally different things. I agree with that. Good observation, Mike. And then Sean Fraley on Facebook says, Bosa goes number 1 next year to Buffalo after half of the team retires at halftime over the course of the year.
Shout out
to Sean. He has the
Vontae
comment
Davis.
of the day. That is our comment of the day. Good job, Sean. Good.
Yes.
Good on you. But getting into your question about Tate Martell, did you say what does he have to do to get involved more, or to take over the starting job completely?
No. I'm just talking about Dwayne. Like, what does he need to do in the offense moving forward just to bring that quarterback run element? Because I feel like he can't be a straight pocket passer in this offense because it kind of takes away an element. So what kind of ratio do you need to see from him moving forward?
No, I agree with you, AJ. He can't be just strictly pocket passing. And there were times against TCU that I was like, Dwayne, you can run the football. Like, don't get me wrong, I love all the passing. Great job, honey, with all that. Good, seriously, good job with the throwing ability. But there are certain times where it's like you don't need 15 to 20 rushes a game of Dwayne Haskins, but like 5 or 10 just to keep that defensive end honest, So every time you've got a read option, they don't know that it's going directly to Mike Weber or J.K. Dobbins. Now, I love the fact that they're switching out Mike and J.K. every other series. They're being very fair with the carry proportions. Mike Weber gets the first series, then J.K. gets the second, then Mike gets the third, then J.K. gets the fourth. They've been doing a very good job of rotating the running backs, and they both seem very satisfied with that. And not to mention, even though they're splitting carries, they're really not, because J.T. Barrett's no longer getting 20 carries a game. So their carry count is pretty much going to break even, I have a feeling. But there are certain times when Dwayne Haskins does need to, hold on to the ball and just run with it, as opposed to handing it off to Mike Weber or J.K. Dobbins. And there were a few instances there against TCU that I was like, oh, God, Dwayne, that's one where you got to take off and run with it. When I saw Mike Weber or JK take it and then just run into a pile of defenders. So, I think 5 to 10 carries a game is probably a good number. I wouldn't go any more than that unless you need to, unless the defense is giving you looks where you'd be stupid not to run with the quarterback. But, very rarely is there those situations where you do need that. I think he just needs to continue to keep doing what he's doing in the pocket and progressing with his reads. I love his presence in the pocket. His ability to just stay in the pocket under pressure and still go through his checkdowns and find a man, and as opposed to whereas maybe a couple seconds if he can't find something, JT or Braxton would have just taken off and run with it. Whereas he allows the play to happen, and then he finds a receiver downfield, or if he can't, he'll wait 4 or 5 seconds before taking off and running with it. So I think that's where Dwayne can kind of be an even better dual threat, just because he has a better arm than Braxton and JT, and he can run it, just he doesn't need to run it as much. He just needs to run it on a few of those read options, whatever the defense is giving him. So, and I think you are going to see more of that now that Urban Meyer is back on the sidelines. I think Urban will call a few more, quarterback reads. I hope it's not 15 to 20 again a game.
Of course.
I'm hoping that he sticks around to that 5 or 10 count. But that's just my take on it. I think Dwayne Haskins is doing a phenomenal job. He just needs to tuck it and run it every now and then to keep that defense honest.
Yeah, I agree. And just piggybacking off what you said, I don't think it's a stretch to say that he's the most talented arm talent Ohio State has probably ever had, especially as far as translating into the next level.
There were some really good ones in the 90s, but it didn't exactly translate. Bobby Horn and Joe Germain, they didn't exactly translate to the NFL. But I think Dwayne Haskins is obviously the best chance Ohio State has at a successful NFL quarterback in their program history. I'm with you there. Go ahead.
Exactly. And so it's been refreshing to see. As much as I love JT, this offense has been moving like a well-oiled machine. And moving forward, Ohio State, I think they're in good hands. Should move to 4-0 pretty easily, and then we'll be right back here on Monday next week to break down what this Penn State matchup is going to look like. I'm excited. Do we have any more comments from fans?
Yeah, we got a couple here. I thought McCall was going to get some snaps at H-back, says Ben Montez on Facebook. That's a good observation. DeMario McCall, I think he's going to be on kickoff returns more and maybe some more H-back. I'm not sure. I think they're pretty well happy with Mike Weber and J.K. Dobbins right now, and then they've always got they bring Paris Campbell in at H-back for a couple plays a game. His time will come, guys. Don't worry. Mario McCall's time will come here at Ohio State. But, you've also got guys like Master Teague and Brian Snead in that running back room that you've got to, get a couple touches to because they're just so dangerous with the ball. Let's see. Do we have anything else?
I have to agree with that observation. I'm surprised we haven't seen more of DeMario McCall on at least the special teams unit. I expected him to be running back punts and kicks, but for the most part, it's been Johnny Dixon and C.J. Saunders. So we'll have to see how they move forward with that.
I agree. All right, I think that pretty much does it for all of our comments. And just before we go really quick, I want to get a score prediction and a bold prediction from you. I want to know how badly you think Ohio State's going to beat Tulane. And any bold predictions, like is Paris Campbell going to have a 200-yard game, or is Dwayne Haskins going to throw for 400 yards? Give us your bold prediction there.
All right, so I'll go 59-0. Ohio State gets the shutout that they missed by 3 points against Rutgers, and I'll go Dwayne Haskins. He throws for 500 yards, 500 big ones, and he cements himself in the Heisman race.
I like that, AJ. I'm going to go with 63-3. I think Ohio State is going to put up – Urban Meyer is going to be a really pissed off head coach on Saturday, and he's going to want to make a statement, I have a feeling. There have been some questions about whether Ohio State even needs him this season. And obviously you want Urban Meyer on your team, but this team is so freaking talented, and they've just done so well. But he's gonna want to make a statement saying, "Hey, this is still my team, and there's a reason that we're doing so well, and it's because of what I've implemented here at Ohio State." So I see him either dropping 63. I'm totally 9 or 10 touchdowns this weekend combined. I think Dwayne Haskins gets pulled before halftime. I think maybe Tulane gets like a field goal in garbage time just so they can say they didn't get shut out. But honestly, I would not be surprised if they did get that shutout because Urban is out for blood.
All right, y'all. Haskins Hive.
Dwayne Train.
Martell's Army. Dwayne Train and Martell's Army.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Well, thank you guys for tuning in to this first edition of the Buckeye Beat. We really appreciate all the comments and all the listeners and the viewers. We really appreciate it. And if you weren't able to watch this live, you can check it out later this week on iTunes and SoundCloud. So if you're listening to us now later in the week, thank you all for tuning in to all of our future listeners. Be sure to tune in every Monday night here. This is going to be a weekly thing. The Buckeye Beat podcast every Monday night at 6 o'clock. Here with AJ King and me, Taylor Ashbrook, and from Columbus and Florida. Thank you all for tuning in. Go Bucks.
Go Bucks.